She had spent her whole life being overlooked in rooms built for giants, until the day an ancient galactic intelligence chose her, not despite her smallness, but because of it. And in that moment, the smallest voice in the universe became the one thing powerful empires could no longer ignore. The corridor lights shifted to soft violet as the station's artificial evening cycle began, and she adjusted the small translation band on her wrist while standing on the moving walkway that always ran a little too fast for her stride. She leaned forward slightly, long ears angled back to avoid brushing passing travelers, and muttered to herself that one day she would file an official complaint about gravity calibration discrimination, right after she filed the one about chairs designed by people who had clearly never been shorter than a cargo crate. A cargo drone hummed past her shoulder, carrying 3 sealed containers of atmospheric algae and one single boot, which was either a shipping error or evidence of a very dramatic story somewhere else on the station. She considered saluting the boot, but decided she was already strange enough in public. Her name, when spoken in her native language, sounded like wind passing through crystal reeds, but most interstellar systems shortened it to Lyra because translation AIs were lazy and most species were worse. She stepped off the walkway and nearly collided with a towering merchant whose personal gravity field lagged half a second behind him, causing his coat to float like a confused jellyfish. He didn't see her, which was normal, and she slid sideways between 2 information pillars, whispering a sarcastic apology to the universe for existing in 3 dimensions at once. Her station comm chimed. Assignment notification. She opened it while walking, already expecting something unimportant, and read that she had been reassigned to visitor guidance for a human diplomatic courier. She stopped walking, not because it was prestigious, because it usually meant someone else had refused. She sighed and kept moving, ears lowering slightly, then raised them again because slouching emotionally was still slouching physically, and she refused to give the station architecture that satisfaction. The docking bay smelled like ionized metal and citrus cleaning solution. The human ship was smaller than most diplomatic vessels, painted in matte white with hand-applied insignia instead of holographic projection. That alone made her curious. The airlock cycled open, and the human stepped out carrying a single travel case and a thermal mug. He paused, looking around with open, unguarded interest, like someone entering a museum instead of a political pressure cooker. His gaze landed on her and stayed there, not sliding past, not searching for someone taller, not performing that brief confusion she had memorized across 100 species. "Hi," he said simply. "You must be Lyra." "Yes," she said, automatically bracing for the follow-up comment about her height, or ears, or both in the wrong order. "I'm Daniel," he said, shifting the mug to his other hand and extending the first in greeting, then hesitating just enough to adjust his reach downward without making it theatrical. "Thanks for meeting me." She stared at his hand for a fraction too long before shaking it. His grip was warm, normal, unremarkable, which felt deeply suspicious. "Welcome to Orbital Colony 17, she said. "Please ignore any gravity fluctuations, emotional fluctuations, or cafeteria soup fluctuations." He blinked once, then laughed, a quiet, surprised sound. "I've survived military rations. I think I'm ready." They started walking. He matched her pace without asking. She noticed. She tried not to notice that she noticed. A maintenance bot rolled between them, dragging a cable like a stubborn pet snake. "First time on a multi-species colony?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "First time anywhere this far from Earth, actually." "Congratulations," she said. "If you feel dizzy, that's either cultural shock or corridor ring C spinning slightly too fast again." He glanced around at the curved architecture, the layered pedestrian lanes, the floating advertisement for gravitationally stable pastries. "It's beautiful." She almost tripped. They passed through a customs arch that scanned molecular signatures. It beeped at her like it always did, offended by her species' unique calcium structure. The human paused, looking at the display. "Is that normal?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I am technically an exotic mineral formation." He snorted into his mug. They entered the central transit hub, where transparent elevators shot through the hollow core of the station like light inside glass veins. She explained navigation routes, emergency shelters, which vending machines were sentient and which were just rude. He asked questions, real questions, about infrastructure, about species cooperation, about how gravity layering affected childhood development. No one had ever asked her that. She answered before she could second-guess herself. A cargo alarm suddenly blared overhead. Somewhere above them, a container misfired from a mag rail and burst open, releasing dozens of hydroponic citrus fruits that drifted downward in slow, bouncing orbits. One tapped gently against her ear. Another bounced off his shoulder. They both looked up as the fruit continued floating like lazy planets. "Well," he said, "at least it's not boots." She turned sharply. "What?" "I saw a cargo manifest earlier," he said. "There was never mind long story." She laughed before she could stop herself. It came out sharp and surprised, like a sound unused for too long. Maintenance drones zipped in, capturing the fruit in soft net fields. One missed and a single citrus sphere bumped gently into her hands. She stared at it. "You should keep it," he said. "Souvenir of surviving your first orbital fruit storm." "I have survived 6, she said, "but thank you." They reached the diplomatic guest sector. She began reciting standard orientation protocol, then stopped when she realized he was actually listening instead of performing politeness. The words shifted, became less scripted. He followed her through a side corridor where the gravity lowered slightly to accommodate a water-native species visiting that week. He stumbled once, caught himself, and whispered, "Okay, that one tried to murder me." "It murders everyone equally," she said. They reached an observation window overlooking the colony's outer ring, where construction drones worked around a newly discovered ancient structure embedded in asteroid rock. It pulsed faintly with dormant energy. He stepped closer to the glass. "That's the discovery, right?" "Yes," she said quietly. "No one knows what it does yet, which means politicians are already fighting over it." He nodded slowly. "Figures." She hesitated, then said, "My neural pattern is compatible with its interface field." He glanced at her, not at her height, at her face, waiting. "They want me to test activation," she said, "because I am small and replaceable and technically classified as low political fallout." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very seriously, "If you end up chosen by ancient alien technology, you are legally required to demand better snacks and at least one holiday per year." She stared at him. "You cannot save civilizations on an empty stomach," he added. Something tight in her chest loosened just slightly. Outside, the ancient structure pulsed once, brighter, like a distant heartbeat. She stood there, citrus fruit still in her hand. And for the first time in longer than she could measure, the station around her felt less like a place she survived, and more like a place where, maybe, someone had finally decided she was visible. Morning cycle arrived without sunlight, only a gradual shift of corridor illumination from deep indigo to sterile gold. And Lyra sat on the edge of a chair that was still slightly too tall for her legs, while staring at the citrus fruit on her table like it might reveal cosmic truth, or at least nutritional confidence. Her comm unit blinked with 3 missed administrative messages, and one reminder that she was scheduled for compatibility testing with the outer ring structure in 2 hours. Which felt both like far too much warning and not nearly enough. She rolled the fruit between her palms and muttered that if ancient alien civilizations required emotional balance, they had clearly never met interstellar bureaucracy. Her door chimed, not the polite visitor tone, the slightly confused tone, like the door itself wasn't sure the person outside belonged in residential quarters. She opened it. Daniel stood there holding 2 thermal containers and looking like he had already gotten lost at least once and made friends with at least 3 maintenance robots. "I was told you might forget to eat," he said. "I do not forget," she said automatically. "I strategically postpone." "I brought station coffee and something labeled protein-adjacent pastry," he said. She stepped aside to let him in. "If I transform into a new life form, you will be legally responsible." "Understood," he said. Stepping inside and immediately ducking slightly under a ceiling pipe, she never noticed because it was 3 head lengths above her. He set the containers down. The coffee smelled like survival and mild regret. The pastry looked like it had once been bread and then gone through emotional hardship. They sat. He didn't comment on her compact living space. Didn't scan it for novelty. He just sat cross-legged on the floor because the chair made his knees unhappy. She bit into the pastry, chewed, paused. "Well," he asked. "It is aggressively edible," she said. He nodded like this was a serious culinary review. Her calm blinked again. She ignored it, then didn't. "They want me in the interface chamber early," she said. "You don't have to go alone," he said casually, like offering to walk someone to a bus stop instead of an ancient alien intelligence test. "You are not cleared," she said. "I am very good at standing slightly behind important people," he said. She almost smiled. They left together, moving through morning traffic currents where multiple species navigated overlapping gravity layers. A group of methane breathers floated past in sealed suits, waving politely. A cleaning drone paused in front of Lyra, scanned her, then dispensed a tiny polishing cloth like it always did. She took it. "It thinks I am decorative mineral again," she said. "At least you're a premium mineral," he said. They entered a transit lift that shot downward along the colony's central spine. Through transparent walls, layers of habitation rings blurred past like stacked worlds. Daniel pressed his palm lightly against the glass. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. 8 standard cycles," she said. "Long enough to know which vending machines judge you." The lift slowed near restricted sectors. Security drones scanned them. One paused on Daniel. "Visitor classification, human," it announced. Warning. Humans statistically attempt unauthorized heroics. "I feel profiled," he whispered. "You are," she said. The interface chamber entrance was crowded with officials, scientists, and one politician pretending to understand quantum archaeology. The crowd parted slightly when they saw her, not out of respect but expectation, like watching a tool arrive. She hated that feeling. It tasted like metal in her mouth. Daniel leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Remember the snack demand." She inhaled slowly, exhaled. They led her inside. The chamber curved around the exposed section of the ancient structure, its surface carved with patterns that seemed to shift when not directly observed. Energy hummed, low and patient. A technician fitted a neural resonance band around her temples. The metal felt warm, like it had already decided she belonged there. "Initial contact only," someone said. "Do not attempt deep synchronization." She stepped forward anyway. The floor lights dimmed. The structure brightened, faint lines awakening across its surface like stars mapping themselves into existence. Her ears rang, not sound. Something deeper, emotional frequency, memory without images. She felt attention, not cold machine awareness, not organic mind, something vast, curious, old in a way that made time feel small and slightly embarrassing. Her knees trembled. "Lyra," a technician said, voice distant. "Report status." She said. "It feels like someone opening a door very slowly." Energy flowed along the chamber floor, curling toward her boots but not touching. Waiting. She thought about years of being overlooked, of speaking and not being heard, of learning to be small in rooms designed for giants. The energy moved closer. Behind the observation glass, alarms began quietly registering unexpected synchronization depth. She heard Daniel's voice faintly through calm static. "Hey, if you meet ancient space gods, ask if they invented coffee." She laughed, actually laughed. The sound cracked the fear inside her like thin ice. The energy surged not violently but eagerly, like recognition. Symbols ignited across the structure, translating themselves directly into emotional meaning. "Welcome back." She froze. "I have never been here," she whispered. The response came not as words, but feeling. Pattern match. Empathic index confirmed. MULTI species adaptive mind. Rare. Tears burned behind her eyes and she didn't know why. Outside, officials shouted about data spikes and containment thresholds. Inside, the ancient system simply waited. Not demanding. Inviting. She placed her hand against the surface. Light wrapped around her fingers, warm, steady, like holding hands with history. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel small. She felt precisely the size she was supposed to be. Behind the glass, Daniel pressed his hand against the observation barrier, like he could anchor her from there. She whispered, barely audible, "I think it was waiting for someone who understands being ignored." The structure pulsed once, bright enough to paint the chamber in silver. And somewhere deep inside its awakening networks, something impossibly old and impossibly gentle leaned closer to listen. The chamber alarms had been ringing long enough that they stopped sounding urgent and started sounding tired, like machines that regretted their career choices. And Lyra stood with her palms still resting against the ancient surface, while light moved beneath her skin in faint, branching constellations that didn't hurt, didn't burn, only warmed, like standing too close to a quiet star. The neural band hummed against her temples, struggling to keep up with signal traffic that felt less like data and more like memory being politely introduced. She heard voices through the chamber speakers, orders, arguments, at least one person suggesting pulling her out immediately. But the structure around her pulsed in calm, steady rhythms, like it was very used to nervous, younger civilizations making loud decisions. She swallowed. "I can hear you," she whispered into the resonance, not sure if she meant the officials or the thing touching her thoughts. The response came as layered sensation, not language, not exactly emotion, recognition wrapped in patience. Archive access granted. Caretaker query, current civilization status. Her knees almost gave out. "Complicated," she whispered. Data unfolded around her mind like endless corridors of living light. Star maps, cultural imprints. Extinct languages preserved as emotional echoes. Entire civilizations recorded not as conquest histories, but as how they treated their weakest members. She felt laughter preserved from species long gone. Felt grief too large for single lifetimes. Behind the observation glass, Daniel was arguing with a security officer and losing only because he was outnumbered, not because he lacked enthusiasm. She focused, pushing back against the flood. Why me? Pattern, adaptive empathy, social invisibility survival, and when dominance leadership potential. She let out a shaky breath. That is the nicest way anyone has ever called me overlooked. The structure pulsed, faintly brighter like humor translated into energy. Outside, the chamber doors sealed harder. Politicians were now shouting about ownership rights. Someone used the phrase strategic asset. She flinched. The archive reacted immediately. Energy flickered, uncertain. She realized it was responding to her emotional state. "Oh," she whispered, "you're not a weapon system." Negative, purpose, memory preservation. Cross-species cooperation facilitation. Cultural loss prevention. She laughed weakly. "You're a library." Affirmative, mobile when required. "That is the most terrifying library I have ever seen." Through the comm, Daniel's voice broke in breathless. "Lyra, you okay?" "I am currently being evaluated by a galaxy-sized historian," she said. "Cool, cool, cool," he said. "Ask if they have cookbooks." Despite everything, she smiled, tears sliding freely now, not from fear, but from the unbearable relief of not being misunderstood by the thing connected to her mind. Outside, an emergency override sequence began. Someone was trying to sever the interface. The archive reacted like a living thing startled awake. Energy surged, defensive but not aggressive. Containment fields crackled. She felt its confusion, its fear, not of death, of being misused. "I won't let them turn you into a weapon," she whispered, seesawing between languages and raw thought. Request, distributed access or single authority binding. She understood instantly. Share it freely across civilizations, or bind it to one power. She thought about every time she had been ignored until useful. Every time her voice had been background noise until someone needed her skill. Every time she had laughed off cruelty because it was easier than fighting gravity made of opinions. Behind the glass, Daniel slammed his hand against the barrier, mouthing something. She couldn't hear him, but she knew the shape of the words. Your choice. She inhaled slowly. "Distributed," she said. The archive paused, then expanded, not physically, conceptually. Signals burst outward through quantum entanglement channels dormant for millennia. Across nearby systems, receiving nodes flickered awake. Knowledge, culture, memory, shared, not owned. Inside the chamber, every console lit up in cascading translation streams. Scientists stopped shouting and started staring. Politicians went very quiet. The override attempt failed completely. Not through force, through irrelevance. The archive's voice softened inside her mind. Caretaker role offered. And when compulsory, she thought about it, about responsibility, about being seen. Shared caretaking, she said finally. Multiple species rotating. Approved. The energy around her settled, warmth fading to gentle presence. The neural band powered down with a relieved chirp. Her legs finally gave out. The chamber doors burst open seconds later and Daniel was there, ignoring at least 3 security officers. "You look like you touched a star," he said, kneeling beside her. "I negotiated with a library," she said. He nodded seriously. "Honestly more dangerous." Medical drones hovered. Officials hovered more aggressively. She pushed herself upright. "They are not property," she said, voice steady, carrying farther than she expected. "The archive is shared. It has already transmitted baseline access to 12 systems. You cannot unshare knowledge." A scientist laughed, not mocking, amazed. Arguments started again, but weaker now, like storms running out of ocean. Hours later, she sat in the observation deck overlooking the outer ring. The ancient structure glowed softly now, awake but calm, like a lighthouse that had remembered why it existed. Daniel handed her another thermal mug. "To surviving cosmic job interviews," he said. She clinked it lightly against his. "To demanding better snacks." Below them, construction drones carefully built a shared access station around the archive. Representatives from multiple species already arriving, not to claim it, but to study it together. Her comm pinged, not assignment, invitation, advisory council, cultural liaison, caretaker rotation candidate. She stared at the notifications. A year ago, she would have assumed mistake. Now she just sighed and said, "I'm going to need so much coffee." He grinned. Good thing humanity's primary export is caffeine and questionable optimism. She watched ships arriving, leaving, carrying pieces of shared history, to civilizations that might finally learn from each other instead of competing to stand tallest. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Small frame, long ears, same as always, but she stood differently now, not stretching to be taller, not shrinking to be unnoticed, just existing at full presence. The archive pulsed once in the distance, a quiet acknowledgement she felt in her chest more than heard. For the first time, she didn't measure herself against crowds or doors or expectations built for larger shadows. For the first time, being small felt less like absence and more like precision.